All right. Well, I am here with my good friends Mina Cho and Cindy Kim, and otherwise known as the dynamic duo of the San Francisco small group. They are serving as the co-shepherds for this amazing small community of faith, and I'm so grateful that today that they have agreed to be a part of our resurrection stories. So, welcome to Cindy. Welcome to Mina. I'd love to hear how the two of you came to be involved with Embrace, how long you've been a part of our church.
So I actually visited Embrace back in January 13th of 2020. And I had only came to be a part of Embrace because my friend Kevin saw that someone had posted Embrace's website on a Facebook group. And I was looking for an affirming church with expository preaching at the time. So that's kind of how I came to Embrace initially.
Awesome. And how about you, Mina?
I first learned about Embrace through good college friends, Jelly, BJ. Um, and I was there when it first was, I think in Oakland or yeah,
Hmm.
Oakland. Um, and I was just visiting. I was there mostly to just see them and hang out. And I didn't have a church at the time. I was still living in Sacramento when I first learned about Embrace. Then I moved to San Francisco and Jelly talked to me about starting a small group in San Francisco, and and then I realized it was because I could actually host one at my place, and so I got connected, I guess, by and through the small group, even though Embrace
Hmm.
still wasn't really my home church.
Hmm.
And I stayed because of the relationships that I built and the people that I met and the community. So yeah, it's been I think a little over 3 years now.
Yeah, that's great. So we have Cindy who joined kind of recently and been part of the church during this pandemic mostly. And you actually participated in the times that we were in different locations in Oakland, which is awesome. And you're part of this big Davis reunion, right? Like most of the people that come to Embrace are part of Davis. But I'm so grateful for both of your presence in our ministry and in the life of Embrace. But I want to like fast forward to September of last year, September of 2020, or maybe like a month or so before that. You were both asked to be shepherds of this small group that you were already members of, and now kind of upgrading your participation, if you will, to take on a leadership role. What were some of your like initial thoughts or maybe questions or hesitations in hearing this call or this invitation? And how did you come to actually say yes to co-shepherding?
I can I can go first on this. So I yes was not my initial response. But my initial response was nope, I didn't want to do it. Um, I mean, at that time, the pandemic, we were still, I think, in lockdown. Um, I was thinking, oh my gosh, it's going to be a lot of time. The commitment, the responsibility, and most of all, I just wasn't in a good place myself. It's probably the worst mental and emotional state I've ever been in. Um, and I felt like when I prayed about it, it was for that reason that I felt so helpless
Mm,
that God said, "Yes, you need to do this." I knew that if I didn't, I don't think I would have showed up to small group. Like there
I
would be
see.
nothing that kept me accountable in showing up. So it was kind of selfish in the beginning, but I just felt this strong urge because throughout the pandemic, God was just asking, "Do you trust me?" And I'd be like,
Mm,
"Yeah, I do." Our wedding was canceled 4 weeks out, and I was, you know, so um grief stricken, I guess. And I was like, "Okay, but I trust you, God." But I knew I didn't. My heart wasn't there. And
mm,
then things were just changing a lot at work. And, some things happened. And again, God is like, do you trust me? And I felt like I was saying yes, I was mouthing it, but I wasn't really trusting God.
Mm,
And so it felt like he kept trying with me and asking like if I can step up to shepherd. I never would have volunteered or stepped up if I wasn't asked. So
mm.
I knew that this was God's way of asking me again. Um, and and I finally, I think, was like, I trust you. It's not about me, it's about God. And I
Mhm.
think I needed to really remind myself that when I am weak, he is strong. And I
Mm.
think that's something that's just really resonated with me throughout this year. So, yep, that's what led
That's
me
awesome.
to agree to shepherd. And also a lot because I knew I would have a co-shepherd.
Fantastic. Thank you. So let's ask your co-shepherd what her initial thoughts and questions and hesitancies were and how you came to say yes. Cindy, how about you?
My initial thought was, oh boy. So I was actually very new to Embrace. And from past experiences, most churches would actually want you to become a member. So, one, I was kind of thrown off like, oh, but I'm not a member, but yet I can still co shepherd.
Mm,
And then the second part is usually they would want you to become a member at a church for at least 1 year just to understand how the church works and things like that. So then I was like, I think I just didn't think I was adequate because
mm,
I was just kind of new. And I did visit the small group twice before the pandemic. And at that time, I had actually opted out not coming because
mm,
I thought, oh, I don't have anything in common with these guys. And so I had, stayed away for I think 2 months. And then the pandemic happened. And then I thought, oh, I need some community. And then
mhm.
when small group had came onto Zoom, and then I was like, oh, okay, I think I can do this to be a participant. And then obviously a lot of things started to shut down. And then, I started coming to Connect and Pray. And then I got to know you, Pastor Sam, a bit more. I got to know Mina and a bunch of the other members. And then when you asked me, I said, I initially had said like, oh, I should say yes because Pastor Sam would be disappointed if I said no. But kidding aside, ish.
Yeah.
I also had a few days to pray about it. And then I thought, even though I believed I felt inadequate, and I also kind of going in, I didn't really know anybody, but I thought, well, maybe because I was also unemployed. And so I
Mm.
thought maybe God was trying to tell me something. And so I decided to just go along with it.
Oh man, that's great. Thank you so much. And actually, it's my personal opinion, Cindy, that you were in many ways kind of fast tracked through the pandemic, and because you participated in so many things that was happening at Embrace. And I actually remember when I asked you, I think you said something like, "You sure you really want me?" or something like that. And but I think a lot of people can resonate with both of you in the sense that when we're called by God, that our initial thought is like, I don't know if I'm the one that you're really wanting. And I love the fact that both of you were praying about that and came to this place of saying yes. And now you are co-shepherds and you've been doing this for what, like 7 months now, right? Since September. And isn't Zoom great, by the way? Because like people don't have to like they travel to get to small group. That made it a little bit more accessible. But so you've been at this for 7 months. What has your experience been like as a shepherd of San Francisco small group? What have you learned about yourself and maybe what have you learned about like taking care of a flock, God's community?
So, what I have learned is shepherding is not easy. I've learned that no matter how much time I spend preparing for small group, I still feel pretty inadequate. But I'm also very thankful that Mina is there and that I'm also not alone. I think one of the things I realize is like when we're shepherding, we're not alone. God is present and miracles do actually happen.
Mm.
And then the second point of, or the second part of your question is like, what I've learned about taking care of Christ's sheep. So I've actually learned that, I think I mentioned in the very beginning that I initially had opted out of small group because I just didn't think that I had anything in common with people. But then I also learned that, whether or not you know a person well enough, it doesn't
Mm.
change the amount of love you give them. So I used to
Yeah.
think that, oh, the deeper I know somebody, the more I would care for them. But I also now think that it doesn't really matter if I don't know them or if I never see them again. Love can be shown at any time, if
Mm.
not all the time. So I think back in terms of Jesus, like all the people that he had cared for and he healed, he may have known some of them, but he also didn't know a lot of them, but he still
Mm.
loved them. And so that's kind of how I'm thinking about, in terms of like, what does it really mean to take care of Christ's sheep, whether or not we know the person? It's
Yeah.
like we should still love them at all times.
I love that, man. That's a great perspective. Thank you so much, Cindy. How about you, Mina? What have you learned about being a shepherd or yourself through all of this and taking care of Christ's sheep?
I was like, dang, that's good, Cindy. We could just end off on that. But I think the first thing that came to my mind when you said, what have you learned about taking care of the flock? I immediately thought sometimes the flock is taking care of me.
Mm.
Um, and I remember one time when Charles was in our small group, he said, sometimes you need small group and sometimes small group needs you.
Mm.
And that really just stuck with me. Um, I totally relate to what Cindy said. There are a lot of times where I show up and I'm like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, or, you know, I know that we're kind of all in this together as we come and meet and commune. And the feelings that I put on myself are purely me relying on my own abilities
Mm.
and my own experience to tide me through. And so it's a really good reality check for me and a good reminder from God to put me in this position where I'm kind of stretched, where I feel vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to be in that position. I mean, I'm sure you know. So, yeah, it's been very gratifying. And it's also been awesome to get to know Sydney more. Thank you for doing this with me.
Thank you, Mina. Thank you, Cindy. And thank you, Charles Cho. Shout out to Charles, who's being quoted more often than I am at Embrace Church these days, with this famous line that sometimes you need small group and sometimes small group needs you. And I know that for both of you, that I believe in your sincerity and in your faithfulness, even when you feel like, wow, like this is really scary to continue to lead. Even after doing it 7 months, I think, Cindy, you said, I don't know when you said this, like a couple weeks ago, but you're so scared like every single time as you prepared about like how you're going to lead. And even so, you find yourself being used by God, being empowered by God. And even when you feel like you're not ready, or even as you remain in that, state of feeling inadequate, that God more than makes up for whatever you feel is lacking. And it is a bonus that you get to do this together and partner in this effort. And I'm so grateful for just the way that you continue to love San Francisco small group, and I'm excited about just the many other things that God is going to show you and teach you as you continue to lead. Um, any last thoughts about like or encouragements about small group and people who might not be a part of small group right now of participating? Cindy, how about you?
My last thoughts for small group, yes. So I would say that, like, to be honest, again, like small group is definitely, Pastor Sam, you always say like the big event is actually, now I forgot. So, but yes,
Worship is the big event and small group
there
is
you
the
go.
main event.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Yes. So yeah, small group is actually, I know initially I, was hesitant with small group, but then over the course of obviously the pandemic and certain like many months, it's small group is basically home, right? It's
Mm,
like we meet once every 2 weeks, but it's also a place where you can pretty much talk about anything, whether
right.
you can rant or rave about something or just really come as you are. I know a lot of places are like, oh yeah, just be yourself. But I
Mm,
generally believe that small group at Embrace is literally being yourself. So I know that even though there are times where I'm still like, oh my goodness, I have to leave tonight. But again, I'm also so thankful for Mina to being there, and as well as the people that I have met at small group. And so I encourage people who have not joined a small group and may be scared that you may not know anybody. But also, I also find that like sometimes like there's a lot of things that we may be unsure about. But I also find that when God nudges you towards the uncertainties, the end result is usually almost always unimaginably fruitful. So
man, I love that. Thank you so much. Mina, last thoughts and encouragements about
Yes,
small group.
I think everything Cindy said, and um, especially for me, I think um, it's very easy to be alone and isolate yourself,
Mm,
especially right now during this pandemic. Um, and we're not meant to be alone. And I think small group, especially doing it through Zoom, has been amazing.
mm,
There's no reason to say no, even if we're like, oh, we're so busy with work, we're super tired. Um, it is worth it to just show up for yourself, for your peers.
mhm.
Yes, your peers. Um, so yeah, that's
Awesome.
it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I love how your resurrection stories connect with that of Peter's as we're talking about today. And Peter probably feeling all of his inadequacies. And in that moment, God calls him. And I love that small groups can be the place where we come, each of us, not just as shepherds, but each of us as members of God's flock with our questions, our doubts, that we can be completely authentic and real. And it's in that moment that Jesus meets us. And maybe for some of us, that Jesus might even call us as he did for the both of you. And thank you again for co shepherding San Francisco Small Group. Thank you for saying yes, even in the midst of uncertainties. And thank you so much for being with us today for this Resurrection Story series. Thank you, Mina. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Blessings to you both.